start our practice session. We will also allow people to join because still only turned one. But
did you not get it?
Stan, let's mute you, Stan.
I'm going to tell Danny to send you the link. Yeah. Did you not get a separate link? I'm going to get Danny to send it right now. Sure. Okay. Okay. Bye.
That Hector McRae saying he didn't get the link.
Danny?
Yes.
Can you send Hector McRae the link?
Yes.
He said he hasn't got it.
They've sent. Wait to hear if anyone else has any problem. Welcome back, Rail. If you want to, you can start sharing the screen again just while we wait. We're going to maybe give everyone a couple of minutes to join because we've been having the technical issues of everyone joining and the links. And then we'll probably start in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
I think just going to get that sound going.
By the way, can everyone hear us clearly? And see the screen. That's the next thing. Just to ask everyone.
Danny,
you can see the screen, okay?
And yes, everyone else can see it, yeah. I'm sure, I'm hoping. Let's give it a couple of minutes. We're still quite low on everyone joining in. I'm going to stand by to mute myself for any phone calls if anyone's having problems.
We'll try and start at 5 past.
Hi, Anthony. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'll stay on mute and with my camera off. But hello, everyone.
How's it, Anthony?
Okay, I think we'll make a start to get going. It's now 5 past. welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to do a little bit of a history in the background of the Krugerrand, and welcome Rael Demby from SA Gold Coin Exchange is going to present that part of it, and then afterwards Jonathan Altman will take over and we'll do the rest of the thing pertaining to where you should hide your Krugerrands, etc. Just on that, Rael, I believe one of the participants from our side sent me a message to ask, is it true that you're giving every attendee a Krugerrand today?
They didn't say gold or silver. I can probably do a silver one for sure. But as you know, a Krugerrand today is a little bit outside of my marketing budget. But I'm glad to see so many people have joined.
Yes, maybe just the panelists, Rael.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Rael, I think everybody's interested to hear you rather than me. So just the floor is yours, and looking forward to an interesting afternoon.
Great. Well, thank you, Stan, for the intro, Danny, Jonathan, and Anthony for allowing us to be part of this. Really cool idea, something that I want to know more about myself. I'm going to start the presentation now. If anyone can't see the screen, tell Danny. So this is the story. My name's Rael, CEO of the South African Gold Coin Exchange and the Coin Shops. As all business stories go, my father started this one or bought this company 40, 50 years ago. He wanted gold coins to be exciting and friendly and warm and democratized, and not something that only the elite or the rich or the fancy could get access to. So in 1999, he opened the first coin shop where we have them all over the country. And the idea again is to make gold easy to understand and a lovely place to learn. And we've won some awards. We've opened shops around town and overseas. And it's been a good ride. And I've been running the business for almost 5 years, but I've been involved for over 10 years. And my father's a non-executive director and chairman. And Danny, thanks for giving us this chance. And Danny used to
maybe
work
I should
with
mention
us a
I
long
used to.
time ago.
Yeah, I used to work with Rael a good maybe 10 years. I joined the company maybe 15 years ago. Worked for a good maybe almost 7 years, 8 years.
Yeah. So let's get into what we're all here for. You know, the first ever Krugerrand was minted in 1967. The first price was 27 Rand. Back then, $1 would get you 1 Rand 30. Today, I haven't checked this today, but we're sitting at over 19 Rand for $1. And a Krugerrand today is about just under 46,000 Rand today. So for all you clever accountants, you can do the maths and see the value of gold versus the value of the Rand. It's always a nice place to start. So what really is gold? Gold has been this standard of value since the dawn of time. And people have been using gold for centuries to trade and transfer value as a form of currency. Governments started using it to back their own paper currency. And, you know, it's probably the most understood value of exchange. people see it as maybe, what do they call it, a barbarous relic, and it might be, but it's stood the test of time for over 6,000 years, and we are proud to buy and sell gold locally, and there's always a booming market and understanding for gold. I think what's lovely about this project and program is to teach all of you a bit more about the value of Krugerrands, or the story of it in the South African context. So the best currency hedge in the world is, at least in third world countries, from North Africa to Zululand with Rhodesia in between, post-colonialists cannot help themselves but print money and devaluate it in the process. There are more banknotes than water and energy combined in sub-Saharan Africa. If you can all see behind the $100 trillion notes and from Zimbabwe, and this currency hedge, dollars or Swiss francs rather than South African rands, Zimbabwean dollars, when the local government might be corrupt or overspending, you can do the maths there. They just find a really nice printer to print some more money, and gold does the exact opposite in that. We've got Zimbabwe, Egypt, and Iran who are also devaluing their currencies. So gold in the last 100 years, as we said, was pegging the rest of the dollar behind it, the Bretton Woods Agreement. But then Richard Nixon said, no, let's stop doing that. So they just stopped and started printing more and more and more dollars, but without holding the necessary reserves. However, most governments in the world do have a very nice piece of the gold pie, and that's 45% of all the gold in the world is being held by governments and central banks. So if the governments trust it, then maybe you or your clients should also. So what about the Krugerrand? Well, it was the first ever gold bullion coin offered to the public. South Africa were doing really nicely, and they had lots of gold coming out of the mines, and they wanted to make it accessible for the man or woman in the street, and this Krugerrand was launched. Then the rest of the world really liked it and started buying it, and it has Paul Kruger and the Springbok on the other side, so it was significantly South African and special to us, and till today, it is still the most popular gold coin in the world. Germany and America are really big. Asia, not as much, but obviously South Africa as well. So Krugerrands, obviously it's the story of Paul Kruger on the one side, the Springbok on the other, very special to us. This mining industry was booming. Yesterday was Workers' Day or Miners' Day, which sort of celebrates this a bit. But this was the first time, like I said, a gold coin was able to be bought in from to the market, to the South Africans. So the country, the Reserve Bank, would guarantee to buy it back and sell it. It was very tradable and used as almost like a legal tender of some sort, or a store of wealth. And then more commonly, what we understand of gold coins is that protection, store of value against inflation or devaluation of currencies. And when times are wobbly, as you've seen lately, gold goes the other way. Gold is always the opposite direction. We'll get into the story of the politics of the Krugerrand later, but it's a really special and unique gold coin that the whole world knows about. So we've got Paul Kruger, this handsome man on the one side, 1 troy ounce of gold is 31.1 grams. What's interesting about this coin, unlike other gold bullion in the world, is a little bit of copper inside, which gives it like a really beautiful yellowy, I think it looks red, but it's a yellowy hue, and it makes the gold harder and stronger and more durable for wear and tear. And this was the first, like I said, the gold coin, the gold bullion coin that set up the rest of the world. So why do people, or when do people buy coins, gold coins? Obviously, in times of difficulty or uncertainty, we start to see a very big upswing in people wanting to buy. And obviously, a lot of people selling because they have them. They bought them for 1,000 Rand and now they're 46,000 Rand. They've made a absolute song. So it's time to sell. You know, when COVID first hit, the Krugerrand price was similar to what it is now. And the safe haven assets, art and watches, Rolexes spiked, and all these sort of hard, tangible assets started to boom a little bit. And then when things started settling down and everyone said the world is going to go back to normal, gold actually started dropping a bit. But in the last few months with wars and big issues or American Fed, things like that, the gold price has shot up in dollars and the Rand has weakened, which is a double whammy for South Africans who own gold. There you go. We had 46 an ounce and $2,350, which is an all-time high. My father's first Krugerrand he ever bought was 500 Rand, and now we're at 46,000 Rand an ounce. So what happened during the Krugerrands market during the apartheid? Well, the US was buying a lot of them, and then the apartheid sort of around the world slowed down a lot of these things. The global bans were pretty rough all the way for the next 15, 20 years. And after that, the democracy, the freedom, the Krugerrands really started kicking off again. But people were still buying Krugerrands because there were limited amounts of them and special and rare in size and shape and quantities. The story of the apartheid still actually made Krugerrands quite desirable. So why do people buy Krugerrands? This is the important stuff of this. Easily traded, global, international, easy to move, easy to store, and get your blinkers on, easy to gift to your grandchildren and children. Long-term planning, we've got wealth preservation, protection against inflation, estate planning, which is more up your guys' alley, and Jonathan will get into this. Some people call it schmuck insurance, or sort of the insurance you have against all the other investments that you do have, and that's owning a little bit of gold, maybe 10-20% of all your holdings. Again, this is when you have other assets, stocks, bonds, shares, property, you might want to put 20% of your money in gold, especially if you live in South Africa. Again, the Krugerrand is priced in US dollars, the gold price, and this is like owning Forex in South Africa. It's like owning dollars, but it's not. It's actually hard physical gold. And supply and demand, economic conditions, and like we've seen lately, the geopolitical and world political landscape is really important in what happens with gold in general. And if you're a South African, you are proud to own South African products. And this is the world's most popular gold coin to own. So why or when do Krugerrands get made? It's usually based on the amount of gold that's in supply. Saab, the subsidiary, has what they call prestige bullion, which is the Rand Refinery and the South African Mint combined. The South African Mint produces collectible coins. The Rand Refinery makes bullion products like the Krugerrand, which we'll get into, and they can control this market based on demand and inputs. Gold availability, how much gold they can source, and how much people are willing to buy. Now, if you've all heard the term bullion or proof, I'm going to give you a quick little story on what the difference is. The bullion Krugerrand is the one we all know. It looks matte and not shiny at all. You can hold it and touch it in your hands, and you can scratch it, and it keeps its value. This is interesting. This is capital gains. It is subject to capital gains when you sell bullion. It's more of like an investment and not like a personal use collectible asset. There's some other things, like it has rounded edges, and the other proof doesn't, but there's little ridges on the outside. Don't bother, we don't count them, we just know the difference, but there are 160 of those little dimple ridges around a bullion coin, and a proof coin has 220, but it's also a lot more shiny. It's got this beautiful hue and like a mirror-like finish. And what makes them more special is they are usually minted in much lower quantities. Like compared to bullion, we're talking about 2 to 5% of the amount each year that is produced. The proof Krugerrands are more collectible, and they are exempt from capital gains tax, but they are charged a more of a premium over the gold price than the bullion Krugerrand. If anyone wants to know, bullion Krugerrand premiums are between 5 and 10%, and proof could be 20 or 30% over the gold price, but it has some benefits that some might find valuable. So this is just playing in the background how they can make a coin, which is beautiful. This is a Rand Refinery video that was made public on the 50th anniversary of the Krugerrand, which was 2017. So we spoke about the difference in rare and collectible coins and bullion coins. Sometimes a tiny little gold South African coin with a 1/4 ounce of gold could be worth $1 million because of its collectability, its rarity, and its whole story behind it. The most expensive coin in the world is a US silver nickel for $10 million. So it's not about the gold or the silver. It's really the artwork, the provenance, the history, and all of that. And you know, we have access to some of the coolest ZAR coin sets in the world, which there's a cool movie we'll show you shortly, valued at over $1 million or 15 million Rand at least. Now, here's another nice video. Krugerrands come in different shapes and sizes, as I discussed with Stan and Jonathan. Maybe we can do a silver Krugerrand here. But there's 1/2 ounces, 1 ounces, quarters, and tenths. This was introduced in the 80s to get people to could afford lower variations, and they didn't have to buy a full 1 ounce. They could buy a 1/2 or a 1/4 or a 1/10. They even made a 50th and a 20th for the 50th anniversary, and silver, which has become quite popular in South Africa and the world. as you can see it again, you've got proof on the top, bullion on the bottom, and then you've got proof and bullion silver as well. Again, maybe if you've got any points or questions on this, we can get to this there. But there's beautiful stories about special dates. 67, 68, and 69 are very rare and scarce Krugerrands, so they are hard to find. And the prices, like I showed you, that 27 Rand for a Krugerrand in 1967, that 1967 Krugerrand bullion coin, we can pick one up or sell one for 95,000 Rand. So that's double the price of gold. So, you know, who knows what's better, proof bullion? We don't know. So again, briefly, we've got how much Krugerrands were being produced at this time. You can see that spread, and you can see some big jumps. The early 90s were tremendously low. If anyone out there has a 1990 Krugerrand proof, you could get top dollar for it. There are certain years and dates and errors, coins that were mistakenly made or made with a scratch or a flip or a rotated die. These are all really cool stories, and that just makes coin collecting even more exciting. And lately, the Krugerrands, they've been producing 1 to 2 million a year, which is significant. And you'll see some interesting information from Jonathan's presentation on maybe why it started to boom a little bit a few years ago. But yeah, there you go. See, we've got gold. We've spoken about lots of this here, but these are the other coins made from the world's biggest other mints. We know these mints, we meet with them every year, we buy coins and talk about what South African customers want. You've got here the gold nuggets from Australia, Canadian maple leaf, American eagle, Britannia, and the Chinese panda. All of them slightly different. They are all 1 ounce of gold, but some might have some other metals in them to change their characteristics. The interesting thing here is when we bring in these coins from overseas, there is VAT. So a South African wouldn't want to pay another 15% on these coins if they could rather just get a Krugerrand. If you wanted that investment type of straight shooter, I just want gold, I just want bullion, you usually wouldn't buy this locally, but some people have their preferences. These are nice. We sometimes get the proof versions of these, and the mints themselves produce other fantastic coins that we sell. So a quick little story. We've spoken about the value, the reasons why these are the values of gold. There are some fees, usually really sharp margins. It's very competitive, the Krugerrand game. Like I said, 5 to 10% maybe is a bit rich, but if you get Krugerrands for spot gold, then buy them. That would be a good offer. What we look at all the time, just making sure the Krugerrands are in fact genuine. We used interesting techniques, but one of the most unique and special ways is you just hold the Krugerrand on your finger and you hit it, and it creates this really nice ping sound, and you know that it's pure gold. And if something in there has been added or taken out, or it's plated, it'll just go like a little smack, and that'll be for another video. But you know, we usually don't see any fakes, but we have our test. There's a Fisher test as well, which is like a 4 or 5 part little story. So if your clients have Krugerrands, we can take them and count them and check them and make offers on them and buy them, or they'd like to sell them as well. there's actually 6. This is X-ray. X-ray and ultrasound are the special ways where you can use guns and things like that, but we don't need to do that. Got a nice story on some fake Krugerrands. How do you buy and sell Krugerrands? Well, sometimes you can get them on the JSE. We look there quite often, but there's usually not much happening there. So the best way is to buy and sell with us. This isn't a sales pitch, but we've been doing this for long, and we've helped estates. We've helped large, massive estates get rid of thousands of Krugerrands, to individuals who have 1 or 2 coins and 1 rands and 2 rands, all shapes and sizes. And we try to keep it obviously extremely secure and safe. And we store coins for people. We deliver to people's homes. We collect from people's homes. We just want to make a one-stop shop for all types of Krugerrands. The other types of coins, briefly, are Mandela coins, political leaders, F.W. de Klerk, Martin Luther King, Malala, all those type of Nobel peacemakers. Then South African old coins, South African Natura coins, then really cool modern numismatics from the world's biggest mints. It really depends on preference, collectability, if you want this as a hobby, if you see value in moving your money around. It really depends on your client or our client. That's what we offer here. We also actually sell digital gold. We put it on a card, and it's sort of stored in the blockchain, and people have adapted and adopted to this new technology quite nicely, where the gold is stored in a US Treasury held bond warehouse in London, and the gold is stored and audited, and you can check it at any moment. That's just something quite cool that we're trying to do here. And I'm going to show you a cool little history story on the Kruger Millions. Please let me know if the sound is not working, and let's give this a go.
The Kruger Millions, Africa's greatest treasure hunt. On the 5th of June, 1900, the British Imperial Army conquered the city of Pretoria, the capital of the independent Transvaal Republic, igniting the biggest treasure hunt in the history of South Africa. As the soldiers marched into the city, their commander headed to the National Bank to claim the famous gold of the Transvaal state for the British Empire. But upon arrival, the gold was gone. In the late 19th century, South Africa was a land divided. The British colonial empire controlled part of it, while the other was governed by the Boer, descendants of Dutch settlers, under President Paul Kruger, including the wealthy Transvaal Republic. The 1880s brought a discovery that would change everything. Vast amounts of gold and diamonds were found in the Transvaal Republic. Almost overnight, it was transformed with a massive mining industry, but soon its wealth attracted the British Empire's covetous gaze. In 1899, the British invaded, with their overwhelming force signaling the end of the Transvaal Republic. But President Paul Kruger devised a plan to secretly transport the Republic's gold beyond British reach, ensuring that one day his people could recover and reclaim their national wealth. The gold was turned into coins bearing Kruger's face and are now known as the missing Kruger Millions, because when the British troops entered the central bank in Pretoria, the gold was nowhere to be found. Records indicated £1.5 million in gold coins had vanished. Theories surrounding the disappearing gold have been speculated for years. Some say it was buried in the savannah by a spy under the instruction of Paul Kruger. He took the gold on a train fleeing the British soldiers and eventually divided and buried the treasure in caves in Ermelo and in the savannah, when he realized that his own men were becoming seduced by the idea of stealing the gold for themselves. Some say it was smuggled out of the country on a train to Mozambique, and then put on a ship to Europe, which then sank and went down with the treasure. Intriguingly, though, these Krugers have been found in vaults in Switzerland, and none were recovered at sea. Some say that perhaps it never existed at all, and that it was merely a miscalculation by the National Bank in Transvaal, who overestimated how much gold had been mined. This could be possible, but then how did the gold end up being found in areas in Ermelo and in vaults in Switzerland? The full treasure remains elusive. Was it divided and reburied? Was it lost at sea? Did it even exist? The truth may be a mix of these theories. In the chaos of war, the treasure might have been split, with parts buried, parts smuggled to Europe, and parts lost forever. More than a century later, the mystery of the Kruger millions continues to fascinate. Somewhere, hidden or lost, part of this treasure still awaits discovery. Own a piece of South African history at the Coin Shop and the South African Gold Coin Exchange. Join Africa's greatest treasure hunt for the Kruger millions.
Cool. I'm very proud of that. Whoops.
Africa's
won't play it again. Let me get rid of this. Can you guys still see this? Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's still, can you still see?
Okay, so I'll just finish here. That video is really great, done by our team here, and yeah, that's the whole story. I'm sure there's loads of questions, but I'm very excited to hear this next part of the story. That's the meat and potatoes of why you are here, and I appreciate the time you've given me. So thank you very much. Follow us, check us out, email us, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Rael. It's pretty interesting. Learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did. So now we're going to move over to Jonathan Altman, who's going to talk about where you should put your money in gold and where you should hide the gold coins, etc. And so we'll move on to that. There will be a break. Jonathan, do you want to have a break after about an hour?
Yeah, I think we can do accordingly. Yeah.
All right. Well, you just organize. You normally have a 10 to 15-minute break to allow people to a body break, make a cup of tea or coffee, and move on from there. So, Jonathan Altman, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Rael, you're quite a hard act to follow, must tell you. I don't have the fancy videos. I think I got the brief wrong also. My understanding was not to say how to hide your goal, but how to actually declare your goal. So we'll have to discuss those things together. Okay. So hello everybody. It's good to be here, and just to say thank you to Danny and to Stan and to Rael just for your input, and also to my friend Anthony Chait for giving me this opportunity. There's so much to discuss when it comes to Krugerrands. That in terms of tax issues, in terms of exchange control issues, and I'm fortunate to be part of a wonderful team at a company called Zeridium, where these are the things that we do. This is our bread and butter, and as there is quite a lot of movement of people coming from South Africa out, and even some people coming in. So the issue of the movement of Krugerrands has really become something that is important to start looking at. So without further ado, I'd like to just share my screen, and we can get going. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see it? Okay. So what I want to do is just give a brief intro, which Rael gave a very big intro, and I appreciate that. There was a lot there that I learned. And just in terms of what all these things were, Rael, the one thing I wanted to ask you, which I'm actually going to need to know, is though we know that Krugerrands are considered to be legal tender, but there were those other coins that you mentioned, the Natura, and I can't remember the name of the other ones. Are those also considered to be legal tender, or are those just gold bullion?
So if it says 1 rand, 10 rand, 5 rand on the coin itself, it's a face value. It is technically a legal tender. A Krugerrand is not actually a legal tender.
Well, that's I want to interrupt. Was my when I used to work and with the company, and my understanding was both are the legal tender. The difference being Krugerrands have a bullion valued legal tender, and versus whereas the Natura was lower face value. So, well, my way of convincing people to buy Naturas was in terms of exchange control. You can declare a Natura possibly as a face value of 50 rand, being that's what the actual coin is, or say on it, but it might have an intrinsic value of 50,000 rand. I don't know what I was waiting to hear the legal thing about it, but in terms of I don't know what is the actual, what would SARS say or not, but you can't argue with the fact that on the front of it says 50 rand.
Yeah, wow, that's quite a Well, let's go into it. Maybe when we get there, I'd love to we'll have a discussion about that. Okay, great. So first, let's give a brief intro, and then look at some stuff beyond the exchange control matters, then exporting the Krugerrands from South Africa themselves, and some other tax matters that just came up. And hopefully we can learn something together and benefit. So let's get going. Hold on. Okay, so we understand the intrinsic value of this coin created in 1967, and it's very important that it's a very durable coin. The beauty of the Krugerrand, obviously, it's an easy and relatively inexpensive way to invest in gold bullion. I think, Rael, with 46,000 rand for a coin, I think it might not be as inexpensive as it used to be, but it certainly serves as a very good safe haven and hedge against any volatility in the currency markets, especially for us coming from South Africa. And that's an easy investment once the value is linked to currency and commodity exchanges. So it becomes quite easy for first-time, non-experienced investors, a person can hold it and they can really get value out of it. But now let's look at some things that came up whilst I was preparing the presentation. Because of the amount of time that's allocated, I just thought, well, let's see if there's other stuff. And what came up profoundly, and Rael, this is really very much where my question is coming from, in terms of these coins, that in February 2022, there was a very big story that broke. And the story is that there's this massive scam where the final exporters of gold were what they were accused of was scamming the South African government of billions and billions of rand. And the way they would do it is in a very technical that way. And effectively there were two companies, huge companies, claiming on 24.4 billion rand between the years 2012 and 2020 in fraudulent VAT refunds. And the reason why this case came up in court was that the companies sued SARS because they weren't giving them back their refunds. And SARS accused them of illegitimate VAT refunds to the extent of over 8 billion rand in 2019, which is 0.5% of SARS' entire tax collection. So if SARS had to give that money back, there would have been a huge amount, and they weren't finding sufficient evidence to make sure to ensure that the VAT had been paid at all, and therefore could be claimed back. As you can see here, it involved gold equal to 70% of all the gold legally mined in South Africa in 2019, which is quite astounding that they could these kind of schemes were put into place. So how did they do it? Very simple. So gold exports, we understand, are zero rated for VAT. That's simple. Now, when you buy gold scrap locally, it does carry the standard 15% VAT, correct? You're buying it, it's vatable from a vatable entity, it carries that VAT. So therefore, the idea is you're buying gold for export, you pay the obligatory VAT, then upon your export, you claim back that 15% and it works very well. But what was happening, it seemed to be, is that they never paid the original VAT. Okay. That's obviously the key to the scheme. Now, I'm not trying, please understand, I'm not trying to give you ideas of how, well, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to anybody, of how to do the scheme. I'm just presenting what the case was. So how would they do that? They would introduce untaxed gold into the supply chain. And then they would fake VAT payments at source for this gold, okay? And effectively, it was all in the play of the second-hand gold sector. And I think, Rael, that goes back to your point that you made earlier, is that one needs to be know where the stuff is legitimate and how it comes, where it's coming from, and then it's not, there's nothing fake about it. So what would happen is that the SARS alleged that there was smuggled or illegally mined gold, and also, and this is the key, illegally smelted Krugerrands. Because Krugerrands do not attract VAT, and this is why my question came up, because they are legal to the extent of their value, okay? And so therefore they introduced this, and it's illegal, by the way, from what I understand, to smelt a Krugerrand without the permission of the Treasury. So they would put this into the legal. Sorry, say again.
Yeah, you cannot melt Krugerrand, a South African coin. It's like burning a 100 Rand note. It's defacing, but if you melt it, you can turn it into whatever you like it to look like, and then you say, "Oh, this is jewelry." I heard a story of it. They said it looked like a necklace, but you could still see Paul Kruger's face in the necklace, and that's what these guys were doing. Terrible, and yeah,
that's terrible. Yeah, it's a brilliant scheme because you're putting in jewelry or gold that you bought, and then you're claiming back. It's clever, but it's really fraudulent on the highest level. So they present the gold, the second-hand gold, such as that from purchased jewelry from people or wherever they would buy it from, and therefore enabling fraudulent VAT refunds to be claimed in that way. So there's this chap, Gerald Matadi, there's a senior manager at SARS. He says that in the majority of the cases, they're generating fictitious tax invoices, which we need to understand where that's coming from, that falsely represent that the taxpayer purchased second-hand gold jewelry from a VAT vendor, therefore claiming input tax based on purported standard rated goods. So how would they do this? So there's the SARS discovered that there were these invoice factories that were companies that were specifically set up to generate fake invoices for the gold dealers, or the gold dealers weren't as sophisticated, they would just generate the fake invoices themselves. And so therefore you have gold ostensibly bought from the businesses that were even registered in people's homes. People were completely unaware that this was going on. And it involved so many different people, a very unsophisticated group of people. And in that way, it was the supply chain. Obviously, they would solve the supply chain. The fraudulent VAT return would be claimed, and the proceeds of the fraud are shared along the supply chain. And Matudi explained that there were so many different levels. There were one, level two, level three, and the purpose of all of these levels was just simply to break the nexus as much as possible between the source and the end supplier, which is really the exporter. Okay, because at the end of the day, the end supplier is the exporter of the gold. These enormous companies were selling enormous amount of gold to the country, zero rated, and making an enormous amounts of money. Okay, the reason why it became so impossible to pin things down is that SARS realized that as soon as they started assessing those smaller suppliers, level one, level two, level three, they would just disappear. And then they would just create a new entity and start supplying in that name. And so it was a very difficult thing. We have this whole vertical process around these apex supporters of the supply chain that really could not be very easily curbed. The main thing that SARS found was that the apex exporters, as well as the lower tier companies, were handling amounts of gold that couldn't simply be explained away as scrap jewelry. And that was the key, is that there was just too much gold being used. And we don't know how many people are hoarding their Krugerrands and how many Krugerrands are out there really being hoarded. It could be anything. And because there's no Krugerrand exchange as such, not exchange, register as such, that we know exactly where each coin is at which time. So therefore, they realized that what's happening is they were buying the Krugerrands and melting them down. It was the main company was a company called Rapper. That you can see there, they bought gold worth 52 billion from 27 different direct suppliers between 2019, January 2019, and June 2020. Well, I don't know if you want to give a bit of context to that amount.
Well, it's something we've obviously been aware of, and we do consider ourselves large, or the largest in South African retail context, and these numbers are a lot more, like 10 to 100x the type of regular retail, even institutional buying for Krugerrands. And like you said, when you smell something funny, you know, just it was too big to be true. And I don't know if you're bringing it up, but this DRC VAT, which most of you are aware of now, these stringent rules on
it's coming up in the next couple
claims.
of slides.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
So because of that, there are. I mean, the way they presented in the articles is they were up to 10 level 1 direct suppliers. It's just there's so much going on in the and so much illicit gold within the supply chain, and so therefore the Treasury fought back. And the way the Treasury did this, and this is what you were mentioning, is that they created a DRC, a domestic reverse charge on the valuable metal. It was published in the Government Gazette on the 8th of June 2022 and brought into regulation the 1st of July 2022. So the idea there is just to remove the opportunity for the fraudulent vendors to recharacterize gold and goods containing gold, and making minimal VAT payments to SARS and extracting large VAT refunds. For the way it's done, the idea is effectively make the buyer of the gold liable for the VAT declarations. But normally the seller has to then say that I sold it and I took it, and then he has to put in his VAT in his VAT claim. So SARS was hoping that this would take out the invoice factories, because these invoices would be answerable to the buyer, no longer the seller itself. Right? I don't know if you want to add anything as on a practical level that you've been involved with this. I'm not sure. It would be love to hear.
No, well, I was not involved in any of this, just to clarify, but we very
No,
involved.
I don't mean the bad stuff.
Yeah,
I mean the good stuff.
Yeah. Just to understand this obviously had a big impact on us. And, you know, think of a small time gold jeweler who is actually smelting some gold. He's bought a bunch of chains and wants to make a new chain, and now he's sending it to the refinery. The refinery has to pay and sort out the VAT. He can wait a bit longer. For a mom and pop jewelry store, it has been a challenge. This slap on the wrist has been a challenge, but we understand it and also see it as like a good thing to protect the fiscus and make sure the right thing is being done. But yeah, the guys who thought of this, you know, they naughty, and they carried on, and they kept pushing, and they went after SARS, and then SARS went back at them. But those claims are monumental. So, you know, it's all good. And the VATable coins we bring in is like an international, the Paris Olympics coins are coming in 2 months' time. There'll be VAT on them. The clients will pay VAT on them. That's normal. The local stuff is zero rated, very different, and we treat it as such.
Great, thank you. So if anybody would like to, sorry.
No, sorry. I got a question from one of the people. I was asking, do you know if there's been any jail sentences for these guys?
You can Google some stuff, and some of it appears. I don't know exactly, but there has been a little bit.
Yeah, what is interesting is when I did Google the companies, they seem to be still rocking on, doing their thing. So there may have been internal management, what have you, that was doing it, but the company like this Rafa seems to be quite successful in doing what it needs to do. There's a link in the slide for those who have the slides, like to get the slides, just to go into SARS themselves, put together a full presentation on how this domestic reverse charge actually works. If you'd like me to go through it, I'm happy to do so, but I think it's quite self-explanatory from what we've discussed.
But just briefly, technically speaking, our whole pastel accounting system had to be changed for this. I'm no accountant, but there's a lot of back and forth, and you actually don't apply the VAT from the invoice you produce. You have to wait for it to come back from SARS. So it does take a bit of time to build in the DRC module.
And it's very admin heavy, I would suppose.
Yeah.
As you say, especially for a smaller jeweler just kind of wants to get his thing moving as quickly as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Okay. So later on in April, so that was in February. That was in February 2022, and then in April, now SARS are on the warpath, and this Krugerrands refining also have a similar issue that they take SARS they sue SARS. The reason why they sue SARS is, once again, SARS refuses to give them their refund. And the High Court held, and it actually wasn't to do only with this. It's a massive case with a lot of different aspects to it. But within that, the High Court said it argued that SARS had reasonable grounds to believe that the fiscus is suffering severe financial prejudice as a result of the manner in which the various participating vendors in the second-hand gold industry operate and their modus operandi, and again, specifically mentioning the illegal smelting of Krugerrands into gold-bearing bars. And so, therefore, the revenue is really aware of this, and this DRC is really the panacea for that ill, and it's unfair on so many levels, and it's the highest level of fraud to obviously to claim that which you never really paid. So so one should just be aware of that and understand that. Okay. Back to the topic that we started out with, and that really is the sporting Krugerrands from South Africa. And I put there legally, of course, because we're not giving a lesson in how not to do it. We're doing a lesson in how to do it in the right way. Okay, so number one, the Krugerrands are a form of gold bullion in the coinage. And because they're actually a form of gold bullion, and they hold significant value. Since they hold significant value, as we understand, the general rule in South Africa, significant value is going to be subject to strict export control on two levels. In the old days, it was really very much about the Reserve Bank, but now the SARS have become very much more involved in it, and are trying to control the process in a much bigger level, and that applies to so many different things that we're doing now in cross-border engagements. Remember in the old days when we would make application for loans from an offshore source to a local source, but just simply going to your bank and getting the appropriate permissions from the Reserve Bank with the stamp. When you wanted to have your share certificate stamp, was very simple. You just went to the bank, they did everything for you. It was very simple, and it was very much around the banking system. Whereas now SARS have become so much more involved that the processes are significantly more complicated. And this is just one of those examples, is the taking out of Krugerrands. So we can see that there are custom regulations that are enforced by SARS, which govern the general import and export of goods across international borders. And the point of these are obviously to ensure the collection of the appropriate duties, taxes, and trade policies that mean to be adhered to. On a most basic level, the Customs and Excise Act says that a person exporting Krugerrands must declare the coins to custom authorities. So that's number one. And then provide relevant documentation, including two things, and that's very difficult sometimes.
Jonathan, just for a second, just to interrupt you. Is there any way possible you can slightly lean forward it closer to your mic? There's times you break away from the...
Apologize.
Right.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just go back there to the Customs and Excise Act of 64, which says that if you are exporting any Krugerrands, you have to declare the coins to the customs authorities. That's number one, and provide relevant documentation, which includes proof of ownership and value. And we'll see there's a little bit more to that now as we go through. Now, this is part of the financial surveillance department of the South African Reserve Bank. Now, they're kind of working together all the time, the FinServ. And the way it works is that they are simply there to regulate and monitor cross-border transactions. And their aim is to ensure that everything maintains its integrity. Because obviously, all the way, if there's a movement of funds or a movement of bullion or movement of high value outside of South Africa inappropriately, then that can disturb the integrity of the financial system. And they are actually mandated by law to investigate any transactions which are suspected of contravening the exchange control regulations and to take the appropriate action. So there are so many varied actions that may include blocking funds, the attachment of money or the assets. There are enormous amount of different things that they are able to do. And so therefore, when one is under the aegis of SARB or SARS in these things that one wants to do, one should be very careful not to adhere to the appropriate legal dictates, because one can find oneself into a lot of trouble. The general thing is, once you make an application, and we'll go through that application now, is 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the nature and the complexity of the application. Obviously, that excludes the time it takes for the authorized dealer to do it. And so the authorized dealer is given the application. He or she will then send it into SARB in order to make sure that everybody can do. But what is that all about? So how do you do this export of these Krugerrands? So effectively, the ex-con regulations control everything, which is very understandable, because that's what they do in all places. And specifically now, you've got two aspects. You've got bullion and you've got legal tender. So it's going to be a complete control by the exchange control regulations together with SARS. So we understand that SARB are actually able, according to law, to determine the threshold depending on what's happening in the country, what its policies are, how it works. So it could be today one thing and tomorrow another thing, and they are entitled to do that. In a document which they issued on the 26th of January of this year, they said very simply, in addition to the single discretionary allowance, residents may export Krugerrand coins or the equivalent in fractional Krugerrand coins. Those are those coins that Rael was mentioning, all the different types, up to an amount of 30,000 Rand as gifts to non-residents, subject to the completion of the prescribed SARS customs declaration. Now that's a big thing, because your free export of your Krugerrand does not even include the price of the Krugerrand. Well, I see you come online there. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I was online. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different angles. There's the money side, or the Rand equivalent. That is probably 1/2 ounce Krugerrand, and that's all you can take out. So I'd really love to see how you send more than 1 Krugerrand out of the country.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I think I don't think it's on a legal level. It's almost impossible to do so. Perhaps those Natura coins that you spoke about earlier would be the ones that you'd be able to do in terms of their face value legal tender. I don't know, but you know,
I mean, I don't know if it's there's other rules that the bullion is considered cash, so it's like cash or cash equivalents or gold could be part of your discretionary allowance, which is R1 million, and you can apply for 10 million more, and each of your spouses or family members. I don't know if that applies here, but in the specific case of a Krugerrand, it's different to a proof Krugerrand. And
yes.
you know, I'm just as interested to find this out as much as any client of ours would also want to know. The rules change quite often.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I wasn't specifically looking out for it because I wasn't really aware of the natura and those things or how they where they fit. But it seems to be that Saab are very focused on Krugerrand. You know, when it's export Krugerrand coins or the equivalent in factual Krugerrand coins, it's all about the Krugerrand. And it's not speaking about those other gold coins that have been made or minted, you know, speciality ones, Mandela coins, whatever the case is. So it would be interesting. That would seem to fit into the discretionary allowance part, as opposed to a specific reference to Krugerrands themselves. If anybody has any insight into that, it would be very interesting to hear. So therefore, so we've said just on Krugerrands, not permitted to be sent cross-border by South African residents other than as a gift to a non-resident, as a general rule. Person who intends to export Krugerrands for any other reason has to lodge an application through the authorized dealer. Now, right now, what we've come up to is clearly at the current price, if your grandmother wants to give their grandchild in England a Krugerrand as a gift, you have to go through a whole process through the authorized dealer just to get the little Krugerrand out. So maybe it needs to be that grandma and grandpa get half Krugerrand each and take it out because that's what they permitted, which would seem to be a little bit bizarre. Yeah, it is how it is, and it creates an enormous amount, obviously, of additional admin for anybody who wants to give a gift of that note, of that time. Okay. Obviously, once you make that application to the authorized dealer, that goes through the FinServ, as we discussed. They will then issue a certificate of approval through the authorized dealer for the export of the Krugerrands. Okay. What about non-resident visitors? So that's very interesting because are they allowed to export Krugerrands? So they have different restrictions, and it's quite fascinating because it's no longer when it comes to no longer value when it comes to Krugerrands for non-residents, but they are actually allowed to take up to 15 Krugerrands with them upon their return home, which is quite a significant value, 15 Krugerrands, obviously subject to certain SARS regulations, which we'll get to at this point in time. Well, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there, if there's anything experience you've had with this.
Yeah, we get internationals, German and American tourists who will pop in, but again, it's up to their own discretion to figure this all out. We don't really hold by any advice. Right. Again, that's why we're on this call now as well.
Okay.
I could also bring in the information from when I used to work there, and there's also like there's the SARS regulations, and then we always used to advise the clients there'll be their incoming own home country regulations. I know specifically, I remember when I worked at Scoin, India, for example, had a regulation where Indian residents were only allowed to bring in with, I think it was possibly 100 grams worth of gold. So that equaled to 3 Krugerrands. And anything over that, they had to declare. If they were in transit, they technically, each airport had specific, and because India is one of the biggest purchasers of gold and holders of gold in the Asian sub-market, they had a transit locker facilities in the airports. So if you were traveling through India and you had over 100 grams of gold, you would have to go through a specific customs section, lock up your gold, and then on your exit of India, you could go return and collect your gold that was in excess of that incoming limit.
So, I mean, it's fascinating that these countries have all of these legislation around it. I often, like, even when I was preparing this, I'm thinking, like, how many people do this? And when we get a little bit later, you'll see where I'm talking about. But are people willing to declare in that way, like in India in that way? I mean, South Africa is always a different animal. You know, we have our own. We have the rules, and then we have our own rules. which I'm not advocating to have our own rules, just let me be clear. You know, are people doing that? And even in this case, are these non-resident visitors taking their 20 Krugerrands that they've brought from Scoin, and are they putting them in their pocket and just going home, or are they actually making declaration? And I think that would be an interesting study to do, to find out whether they are, because I don't know. Are you telling them that there are certain regulations? Is that part of what you are required to do as a seller? That would be interesting to know.
No, it's not it is up to you. We do our regular KYC to determine who you are, source of funds, those types of things. But at the end of the day, you decide what you want to do with it, just like pretty much anything else. And we would like to find ways to facilitate these movements on behalf of clients. That's what I believe one of our big pushes are for the next year, but it has to be totally above board. And there are specific coins, like vatable coins. You might pay a bit more for them, but then you could take out as much as you like.
Right.
People say, well, then will I be able to sell that when I get to the other side? Well, you can't buy this thing here for really cheap, in comparison, and take it over there and just sell it to the first person you find. It's like a really nice piece of art. You buy it here, you roll it up, you send it overseas. You're going to have to find that buyer on the other side.
Okay. No, that's just important to understand, I think, for us, that it's not the onus on the seller to tell the buyer that he or she needs to go through a process in that way. Okay. Now this is just, I just quickly made this slide based on yours, Raoul. There's no restriction for non-residents, by the way, on the export of gold bullion in the form of foreign coinage. So all these Australian nuggets and maple leaf and eagles and Indian head and all these different Chinese golden panda, all these different coins, if they are purchased by non-residents in South Africa from Scoin, for whatever reason they would do that, so then there is no obligation to go. Sorry, there are no restrictions on the amount that they can take. However, and this once again starts, it has to be declared at SARS, at the customs office upon exiting South Africa. And I think that is going to be the single challenge of all of this, is this this declaration in the way that SARS are requiring it to be declared, because we'll see as we go through it that it's not. It's firstly, it's not so simple. To a certain level, it's simpler than it is relatively, but it also doesn't seem to be called upon or required. So maybe what we could do at this point now, it's now 2:15. We've been going now for just over an hour. Is maybe stop now and come back together at, let's say, 2:25, just to complete the next section, if that's good for everybody. Danny, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Super. Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, everybody. Okay, a couple more minutes and then we can start.
Just to mention to all those out there, we're having an internal discussion between us about how technically Krugerrands are a legal tender, and I remember when I used to work there, it was a lot less cheaper, so it was a bit more affordable to take, say, a Krugerrand for 10, 15,000 Rand to a store and say buy something and ask them for change. But it comes down in terms of individual companies of what's the reasonable amount that you're paying. But technically, more you could buy a car would be the closest thing where the value of a Krugerrand would match your goods, and to get that. Yeah, I got a question statement from one of the audience saying yes, they agree that Krugerrands are legal tenders. Yeah, I just don't know how a company they would have to bring in an outside verification service or something to verify it. That I'm sure would be the same as if people were doing any other tenders that's legal.
Well, probably easier to use a credit card.
Yeah.
Well,
the app,
Danny,
app.
Yeah, we accept Krugerrands. People give us Krugerrands, and we swap for other coins, collectible coins, very rare and old coins like the ones in the Kruger millions. But yes, as Stan said, you won't go to a coffee shop and pay with a 1/10 Kruger for a cup of coffee, because you'll need quite a bit of change.
Well, that app that you mentioned. Sorry, that app that you mentioned in your presentation, does that app? I saw there was a card. There was a picture of a card next. Is that app then able to be used like as a credit card where you can tap and it works that way?
So we did have a function like that, where we were lending money against the gold that was being held with like a 70% loan to value. What we found from clients was that the sort of interest rates, the credit card interest rates, just sort of didn't make that much sense. But those projects and products are out there, and maybe in the South African context, people want to touch the gold. They want to hold it and take it home with them and put it under their bed. It's a store of value. You can store it with us, or you can take it home, and that gives people real peace of mind. And to be honest, we have doomsdayers or Armageddonists who buy big boxes of silver. They're called monster boxes. It has 500 ounces of silver. They believe that if the world were to God forbid there was a issue or a big bomb, you need some physical value like silver to buy a cow or swap for a house or whatever, and gold or silver could still have this real store of value in a modern world. You don't need to be a doomsdayer. You just need to think realistically. If all the servers in the banks were to switch off today, would you have anything? It's a scary thought. It's not impossible to imagine that. But having some value in your home, and gold is the smallest but most valuable thing you could have, or a diamond or a watch. But gold is liquid and you can use it anywhere. So there are people who believe in that.
Sorry, Johnny.
Further on, you're saying about the silver ones. I do know. I think it's the Swiss bank or one of the Swiss mints. They do gold credit cards, but it's actually I'm not too sure offhand what's the size. I'm sure you know about this, where so I think it's 25 1 gram squares on the card. And so as a person who was in a do, they believe that you could then break off that one gram and give it to someone for trading. But
exactly. We sell products like that. Some of our clients like to buy 1/10 for their grandchildren and constantly buy all the time, and then you divvy them out, and I mean it goes sort of under the radar. It's really good for estate planning, but that's not my advice. I'm just saying what people do.
Yeah, then also to go back on the questions that someone asked, he said the Krugerrands can be used to offset debt, but for payments of expenses, unless you agree with a merchant on the value, it's give and take. But obviously, due to the gold value, it could be something that's beneficial to someone to accept in terms of payments if you agree a beneficial rate of gold to.
Look, again, it's this universal spot rate. So there might be a little bit of give and take. There's a premium, but if you buy a car, if you go there and say, I have 10 Krugerrands at 46,000, 460,000, there's my maths. Well done, get the car. It could be give and take 5%, but yes, it is possible. I just don't think it's done that much anymore. But that just clarifies maybe an error on my part. Thanks, Danny, was that it is not a legal a face value, but it is a legal tender. It is a legal tender, but it doesn't have a face value, which is a 1 rand or 2 rand. And if I may briefly, in Paris, in France, the French bank, they issue out gold coins with like large face values, like 500 euros, for example. And sometimes that amount of gold could be less than that face value. And they give you the option to go to the Reserve Bank of France and cash it out. So it's actually like a double whammy. And we sell coins like that from the Paris Mint that are redeemable in their gold content or their face value. But that's a very innovative product that the Paris Mint has.
But would you then buy that for 500 euros?
Well, I wouldn't,
but you're selling it as the gold value.
Yes, it depends really, but in if South Africa came up with a project like that, that would be cool. But the gold is the real story there.
Sure.
So there's some good start.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so let's carry on from where we picked on. Thanks for everybody for your lovely input. It's just nice to be able to have just conversations as well, not just not simply a presentation. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what do you do now? We've decided that we are now going to do everything, of course, in the right and appropriate legal way. And so what does one do? Well, how does one go about declaring all these things? So number one, this is on the most simple, basic, technical level. On the date of departure, you go to the customs office at the airport or port or however you are departing, and it should be done before your final baggage check. You have to complete what's called the traveler card TC01, and in that you would say that you have you're in possession of Krugerrands, which you wish to export. You have to have a verbal declaration to the customs officer concerning the coins. And then you also have to ensure that the information that is reflected on the traveler declaration corresponds with information as per the SARB FinServ documents. So I just want to bring this up here so we can have a quick look. Sorry, I'm not sure now why it's not coming up. Okay, this is this traveler card. Is everybody able to see it on their screens?
No.
Does it not come? Let me just.
You have to bring it.
You have to bring it into the screen. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to do a new share. There we go. There we go. You should be able to see that now.
Yeah.
Okay. So the traveler card. I don't. People who travel. In the old days, I remember filling these in all the time. Different places wherever we went to go. just arrived back from Dubai last week, 2 weeks ago, and one is supposed to, as you can see here, the teacher said the declaration must be completed by all travelers enter or leave the Republic of South Africa in terms of etc. etc. They didn't hand them out on the plane. They didn't hand them out. They didn't ask for it at passport control. They didn't ask for it when we walked through customs. So this is the traveler card that one is supposed to be completing on one's exit and even on one's entrance into the country. But it seems to be at the moment that there's not that much of a strict policing of this. I'm going to go back to my original screen there. So that's the traveler card that one has to fill in. It should be noticed that SARS do not want to have all this physical documentation. Obviously, the world is working towards everything being online, and so therefore there's currently an online platform which is being piloted through 3 of the airports, Shaka, the one in Durban, the one in Cape Town, and the one and OR Tambo in Joburg, apparently. In which one is able to make these declarations even prior to arrival at the airport. It seems to be in sync with what is going on internationally, and this is the SARS online platform, which I'll go to now as well, just so that we can have a look at that. But once again, it doesn't seem to be at the moment. They're piloting it. So there's this whole declaration that you would go onto, and it's a very simple. It's a plug and play. You go in, as you can see. I'm not going to go through the whole process now. Everyone is able to do that, but effectively, it's that TC01, but on an online system, and it captures all of your data. I mean, it's capturing everything. It's capturing, you'll go into the travel details, the currency details, the payment summary, everything that you need. But in capturing that, what SARS certainly will then have is a record, an online record of one's travels up with inside and outside the country, and what everyone is taking with them, which I think is really what SARS are ultimately trying to achieve, is to have a much better knowledge of who's going where and what are they taking with them. Because I often wonder how many of those pieces of paper were actually in any meaningful way processed properly by the customs office. So if we go back to where we were, those are really the declarations. That's the first part to do, and that's the most important legal part that one has to complete in order to ensure that one is obeying the law. Once you've done that, the part of the documentation that's required in that TC1 is the following. You have to have that SARB FinServe application. And we mentioned that above, how important that is, the application and the response that they've given on a SARB letterhead. And that's without that, if one is trying to export more than, in our case now we've learned, even one Krugerrand, but if one is exporting more than one is allowed to, so one has to have the applications signed off and on a SARB letterhead. Then, in addition to that, and well, this is where you guys would come in, is the invoices received when the Krugerrand coins were purchased, and that's obviously fundamental. Now, that's quite difficult. If I have been given, 2 Krugerrands by my grandmother before she passed on, I'm not going to be able to have those invoices when the Krugerrand was to prove when the Krugerrand coins were purchased. So I'm not really sure how one would do that in the current regime. Well, I don't know if you've had that experience in any way, and if you have, if you could share with us what one could do.
No, I mean, if they specifically asked for that, and the person did in fact buy from us 25 years ago, we might not have those records. And it actually hasn't come up in this sense, because I don't think people are doing all of this.
Yeah, I also don't. Which is why what's so fascinating is that they've gone to so much effort to put in a system, and I wonder whether it's really being policed in any way, or if there's even any interest. We, as I said, I traveled with my wife a couple of weeks ago. We went through passport control. No one asked any questions. It was a very simple. She didn't even look at us when she looked at our passports. So one has to wonder, who they're looking at and who they're looking for, because your average, I think, household has probably got a Krugerrand or two somewhere over the years, but it's just be fascinating. If no, I don't think anybody kept their invoices when they bought their Krugerrands 25 years ago. So it would be interesting to know how that you would get by that. Then there would need to be a valuation of the coin, which obviously, Raoul, your company like yourselves would be able to do quite quickly, however many coins there are, and then also quite an impossible task. The proof of funds available, part of the KYC, the proof of funds available to purchase the coins, right? Meaning a bank account statement dated around the date the coins were purchased. So if I've got coins from 25 years ago or 3 years ago, where do I get all of that from? And I think it becomes a little of an impossibility. And I haven't seen that there's been anyone saying, well, in the event of not having this, there's certain ways of getting around it. I think it's one of those quirks that exist in our systems, that we've got very theoretically good systems, but not necessarily easy to police, and certainly not easily to administrate. Okay. Now, what then happens is that once all the documentation has been approved, the custom officer generates a TRD1, which is a traveler declaration. Now, I don't know if anybody has, a few years ago, well, many years ago, when laptops weren't as popular as they are now, when a person traveled, people were scared that when they brought back their laptops or their phones, especially when the phones were started, or anything of that, of any reasonable value, people were worried that they would be stopped at customs and they wouldn't be able to prove that they had bought those articles in South Africa, and so therefore they would declare them in this traveller's declaration to SARS at the SARS office. You could declare your weapons and you can declare your cell phones and all different things, and then they would get this declaration of a document which would have all the details of that, as you can see here, what the declaration item would be, and the value and the provision, whatever it is, they would have everything put down. And then where you would take that with you on your travels, and when you came back, if the customs officer stopped you, you would be able to show him this document, and this document would then be used to prove that you took those goods from South Africa and you're just bringing them back, and therefore you wouldn't have to pay any customs duty on that whatsoever. Now, the idea is similar to this, is that this same declaration is then going to be used as a proof that you have declared that you're taking out all the different Krugerrands, etc., 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 on the back of the original documentation that you had, and then you have that, and you don't have to worry about SARS because it's all been signed off. So I don't know how many people are doing this. I'm just saying what the law requires, and hopefully people, in the event of them wanting to take the bullion out, Krugerrands out, in the way that they should be doing it, would be the appropriate and proper way of doing it to ensure the integrity of the South African financial system. And so therefore, in conclusion on that level, exporting these Krugerrands really means navigating quite a complex regulatory framework. It's provisions by the Reserve Bank, by the Revenue, some other relevant authorities that may prop up, like FinServ, etc., which is part of the Reserve Bank, but it's another thing and a bit more admin. And effectively, the compliance with these provisions is essential to ensure that everything's lawful and according with our economic and trade policies. I mean, no one's going to say this on this webinar, but I wonder how many people have a real experience with going through this complex admin process in order to declare certainly one Krugerrand, but even if they're taking out 15, 20, are people actually declaring that? I don't know. I do remember as a younger man, I'm careful what I say here, But so where people would take money out of the country, not 100% legally, and because people were concerned about the exchange controls and the being part of that regulatory framework. So I wonder whether it's a great idea with very little execution and certainly very little policing. Perhaps if you're taking out hundreds and they fill your bag, and as you go through the X-ray machine, they see that there are all these coins there, maybe they'd stop. One is also restricted on the amount of currency one is allowed to take, just normal currency, and bring into the country. And I don't know anybody, not that I know everybody, but I don't know anybody's really declaring these things, because I think the complexity of the declaration is so huge. If anybody on the webinar would like to make a comment in the chat or anything of that nature, please do, because it would really be quite enlightening to know if people are following this in the process that is set out in the way the government would like it followed, because that obviously would ensure that there's an integrity within our system. But I think that integrity has fallen away on a much larger scale by much larger people than those of us who are sitting in this environment. Well, I don't anything to add. Danny, anything to add? Stan, anything that you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, I think I want this the people who are listening to this have clients and understand what their clients might want to do and sticking to the rules. And it is often case dependent. Some people understand their particular matters differently. They are sending a bunch of artwork and jewelry anyway overseas. There are people who are financially immigrating, or they'd like to just send a couple of coins every year over. And why we're excited to be part of this is that we want to learn with you and test some cases with clients. You guys are accountants and you work in firms, but Ziridium has their knowledge and expertise, and it might just depend if a client might be able to take 22 million out with them and their partner with the additional 10 million each, but maybe they might be able to take another 20 out in coins, in specific types of coins, which we have. So I think that this topic was great, but there are other ways to skin the cat and look into this. And it's better to do this the right way, but there are still ways. I would love to send one Krugerrand a year out of the country, because in 20 years' time, I'll have a nice kitty somewhere else. And some of your clients might want to do that. They might be able to add additional funds to what they're already moving. So it depends per case, per matter. But this is a matter of doing a test, and maybe there are some questions and I'd love to see what's there. But I hope that this didn't make everyone feel like, no, Krugerrands, I'm never going to touch this or send them out. It's a waste of time. There's still a lot to do, a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? What is the effect when you land in another country? Now, you completed this form for the Reserve Bank in South Africa, you land in America, they want a declaration of what you're bringing in. So now there are limitations on the other side. So you need to be cognizant of that.
Certainly. I mean, that's going to be an international tax issue, which each country will depend on what its specific provisions are. But it's got as absolutely no relationship to the Reserve Bank and the ex-con controls of what they're trying to do.
Except that you've completed a declaration and you arrive in another country that exceeds the amount of money. What happens to the surplus? The customs officer pockets it.
And we hope not. It depends where you are, I suppose. I think the part of the online system is that we know that tax authorities throughout the world are much more in sync than they used to be, and an online declaration is much easier to find than a paper declaration. again, as I said, I don't think that the admin systems exist in our country yet for that paper declaration to be shared with a partner country yet, but whereas the online might be able to. So, one has to be, if one is declaring, one is declaring. Obviously one has to declare, but one is declaring in one space. My gut feel is that if one doesn't declare in the place where they land, they could find themselves in a lot of trouble.
Just taking on from what I've, I don't know firsthand or in exact knowledge, but I have obviously by pure what I find as entertainment. I watch a lot of those border control shows, specifically the Australian one, the England one, New Zealand, and there's often you'll see someone's traveled around the world and they've traveled with excess cash, and you hear all the different regulations where when you land in another country, there's all the different, everyone's got their legal limits, and whatever over that limit, you have to either declare. And so it opens up what is the country, each country's what do they recognize in terms of the Krugerrands value? Does that then affect your how much cash you're bringing in? But I've yet to see someone being stopped with gold and Krugers, because one Kruger way puts you over the limit in terms of what you can declare. Whereas like you see people traveling, and it's maybe their limit is like 10,000 euros or dollars, and they carrying 15. And obviously to carry 15,000 in dollars, it's quite a stack of money that picks up on X-ray. Whereas if you're just holding one coin, how can someone know that one coin that you're carrying is worth 45,000 rand?
And especially if it's one of those coins that Rail's selling, which has got a R2, or is the gold coin with the 5 rand number on it. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
You can't say anything about that.
Well, I mean, again, it might be a question of liquidity, but you've heard of the Sammy Marks Tikkie or the Felt Punt or the Ian Punt and these special South African coins, like in that movie. One could be R1 million and it's the size of a 1/4 ounce Krugerrand, and you could put it in your wallet. The question is, when you get there, you need to find someone who's interested in that particular coin. But, the real thing is it depends on the coin. It depends on the values. It depends on each individual. And it would be great to see a test case or maybe if somebody has a client in this audience who's thinking of moving or immigrating financially. I don't know what the clients also want. You need to store the coins when you get there to the other country, or we can help you sell them when you get there. But it's quite an interesting debate.
Yeah. Well, what also actually popped up in the conversation and the research is this, again, it doesn't seem to be, it speaks about high value assets, but what about stamps? What about antique furniture? All of those are all real assets that hold value and increase in value. So it's not only coins, but are those things also subject to these same declarations? Because you can have a copy of an antique that's worth 5 rand, and you can have a real antique that's worth 25 million. I don't know, I'm not into antiques, but and the stamps are the same. So there is a lot of complex regulation, but not necessarily the same level of compliance or buy-in into that because of the complexity of it.
And now you know why stamps are still popular.
Yeah.
Can take a little album and you have a sort of Cape Quarter and you auction it off in England for 10 million rand. Yeah.
It's there's a lot to be said about a different type of asset, which I think is really the point of this, Raoul, is to allow for people to think about that in a way to invest in those things. So okay, great. Okay, Are there any questions from Danny? Any questions yet from the our esteemed audience around anything that we've discussed? It's a good opportunity or a good time for that.
I don't see anyone's asking any questions at the moment. But I do see your next slide was supposed to be on other external exchange control topics. So let's go on. If we get any questions, I will.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so I want to look at some other tax things that have come up regarding, again, specifically Krugerrands. That's been the focus of the. So the biggest question, obviously, is the sale of a Krugerrand considered to be a means of revenue, or is it a capital gain? And that's really the discussion, that there are a number of tax court judgments on it. For many years, the courts really had the view that if there is an asset that you acquired as an investment, it's an asset which is which you expect a recurring flow of income rather than a resale at a profit. And an asset with acquired with a view for resale at a profit is one which is acquired in pursuance of a scheme of profit making, and therefore is revenue. So therefore, in ITC 1543, the Krugerrand was held to be of a capital nature. And Earl, you actually mentioned that right at the beginning. And since it's held to be of a capital nature, so the disposal thereof is one of capital. However, there's certain cases that were brought, and Hoof brings one of them as a case where the disposal of Krugerrands is part of an estate. And that also becomes a discussion, because are you disposing it as part of the estate, or are you disposing it in order to get funding? If you're disposing it as part of the estate, it has certain aspects around it, or if you're disposing of that just to get funds, and therefore you have to pay a capital gain on that in a different way, because when your capital gain began, it's very complicated, and it's not for the discussion here. But I think what is important to understand is that because it's an asset whose value, especially in South Africa, increases and has increased over the last 20 years or so to such a high level, it's an important thing before one disposes of it to be very clear what the nature of that disposal is, in order that one doesn't find oneself being taxed in a way that one doesn't really want to be. And so just that was one point of this that I wanted to make. In Hooft, where he said in 1997 case, the taxpayer invested his surplus cash in Krugerrands, which is what Rail is suggesting we do, which he intended to hold as a long-term investment.
Jonathan, do you want to lean again? Yes. You're moving away from the mic.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so in 1997, the taxpayer invested his surplus cash into Krugerrands, which I said Rail suggested we do that. It's a long-term investment. It's a great investment. But however, in his case, he needed liquidity. He needed to buy for his wife. And the court held that he wasn't buying the Krugerrands as a means of just, as a revenue stream, but rather he originally bought it for. And the purpose was not to make a profit, but rather to realize his capital assets, to acquire another capital asset, and therefore, once again, was held to be of a capital nature. And so, therefore, it seems to be that it's very, very focused in the legal system around the Krugerrands. The disposal thereof is of a capital nature, because the purchase thereof is generally not to realize a profit, but rather to acquire a capital asset. And I think that's just important for us to bear in mind. Something else that just shot into my mind when Rail mentioned that your Krugerrand is worth 46,000 rand. So if your Krugerrand is worth 46,000 rand, you've got 100,000 rand of a donation. One has to be theoretically then aware that if you're giving your gifts to your grandchildren or children or whoever else that you want to give your gifts, if you're going to give 2 or 3 Krugerrands, you might find yourself subject to a donations tax event, and that is something that people should just be aware of again. And I think this is who is declaring their donation of their Krugerrand to their grandchildren? I don't know. I suppose one should, because that's the appropriate thing to do. But do we do that? Don't we do that? That is obviously a choice that everybody has to make of their own. And in doing so, then they have to comply with the appropriate laws. So that is very much my my discussions for this afternoon. There's a little bit more time left than I thought there would be. But it's now on 3 o'clock. But I would love to hear questions. Rael, I see there is a question there around where you can get Krugerrands appraised, and I'm not sure if you answered that. Maybe
no,
you can just speak through that.
No, we have stores around the country. You can also email me directly, and we've got a team of guys in our trade department who, that if they need to look at photos of them, they'll need to go and check them out in person. We got shops around the country, head office here in Joburg. I'll leave my info, but it's railD@sagoldcoin.com. And we love having these discussions, and I don't know if that's fair to say, but it's still a little bit of gray area. We don't know. It depends. But we'd always like to rather be on the right side of this and do what's best as all of you would for your own clients. So, maybe there's a particular matter we would love to look at. We've dealt with estates. Anthony, on this call, he knew about some interesting stories about the Krugerrands as well, whether it was deemed capital in nature, or if the guy said, look, I've been collecting these coins for 100 years. It's a collection. It's not, it wasn't, I didn't have an investment in mind. So, it just depends. So that answers that. Anything else?
Yes, are there any other questions anybody wants to know? The recording of this is not being sent to SARS, so feel free.
Okay, then I'll ask more questions.
I think that people have specific cases, and I think that in terms of within a practice, it becomes an important conversation to start having with clients. If one is aware of their holdings in Krugerrands, stamps, whatever the high value things are, is to do people want to externalize that wealth, and then if so, how can it be done in the best way? And in the most appropriate way, and obviously the most legal way, so that one doesn't fall foul of SARS. Narelle, you mentioned it'd be nice to have a case study. Just you don't want to be the case study.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. That rather let's do it in the correct way and advise properly, to make sure that all the different odds and ends are kept are done appropriately.
Isn't it something here which is it's very easy to define the value of Krugerrand, whereas if you have diamonds, that's also very transportable, and yet it's not that easy to value it. To see it straight away. I mean, the prices of gold coins are pretty well quoted, whereas diamonds, I mean, there is a basis for value, but it's certainly not as easily valued as this.
Well, there is subjective value almost in most of them, anything besides a bullion Krugerrand. The thing is, I'd imagine, based on SARS requirement to see the invoice and proof of funds, is to say, I don't care what you say it's worth, this is what you paid for it. Yes. And the same with diamonds or anything like that. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult and open space to say things in. But
okay, so I don't know if there's any more questions, Danny. Anything?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. So the first one is, it's now if some Krugerrands have been incorporated into a bracelet, what are the implications? I would say let's expand this. If Krugerrands have been made into jewelry, that'll change in terms of what you defined that as. I don't know. My understanding would be that obviously the jewelry will have a gold component that's taxable, in that the bracelet part would have to be like say, from what I understand, if you had bought some jewelry, your jeweler would have given you some certificate of authentication and breakdown. So it would break down what the gold content of the bracelet or metal content of the bracelet versus the gold content and value of the Krugerrand in the question. And then when your invoice was coming, your invoice would have I don't know if it has then a price breakdown where the Krugerrand part is 0 rated item, and then your jewelry part would be a VAT item.
So it's quite an interesting question, because I'll tell you what happened to me personally is that my late mom had two little gold coins which she had made into cufflinks for me. It was the same idea. However, the jeweler made a mess, and he welded or whatever, soldered the gold onto the gold coin, as opposed to making a holder for it, in a proper holder. So he damaged the integrity of the gold coin. Well, I don't know if that then takes away the value of the gold coin, and then it becomes like gold, or does it still retain a certain level of value? Because that would be an interesting question.
That's not an uncommon situation. A lot of that did happen with those coins, especially in the early days.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of starts Jonathan, your beginning presentation on turning Krugerrands into jewelry,
right,
and sort of turning that into something of more value. You would actually be damaging the Krugerrand in some collectible nature, but there was, as Stan said, a reason why people were doing this. You'd make a beautiful chain or brooch or cufflinks, and you get on the plane and cool. So it can be done, and it's hard to answer. And ultimately it is gold, like jewelry, and you are going and arriving somewhere else. If you've bought 50 Krugerrands and you've got them in a pendant and you have them in a box at customs, I think you would be in a lot of a difficult area. You would need to prove all of these things like invoices and proving the contents, which is jewelry, and what is bullion Krugerrand. So it really would depend, but sure, you can take out jewelry and those types of things that you're wearing, but if we're talking about like a one-stop shop, or we're talking about significant value, leaving the country, sticking to the rules, but using your allowance as best as possible. Those are maybe two types of people.
Yeah, and then I hear that. I think on that question, if the coin retains its integrity and as a coin, then it would be treated as a coin as it passes through customs, as opposed to there would be the gold and then there'd be the coin itself. Again, are the customs officials sufficiently educated in that? That's questionable. That's questionable.
So my thing, it comes again, as Rael said, back into the beginning, where now with it now being incorporated into that, you've been paying the VAT on the Kruger, which would then be people trying to claim. It's probably too small scale for SARS to come down on, but it is possibly where those guys started with their original, where they're not technically smelting down the Krugerrand, but they've now attached it to jewelry in a permanent manner versus where if you had a bracket part of the jewelry and that could be taken out. But now with it now physically attached to the jewelry, it is sometimes maybe I remember back in the day, some people were arguing that it then becomes vatable in that it is now a permanent attachment. All right, let's move on. The next question is, can the costs to hold Krugerrands be capitalized into the calculation of the capital gains tax in terms of when you now dispose of it, I'm assuming?
And yeah, would that be, for example, giving it to Steyn to hold it for you over these 25 years? Is that, I would assume that's what you mean. You obviously charge for the holding of these things.
Yeah, it's reasonable compared to single vaulted facilities, which you would have your own box and serial number. We store it more like in bulk facilities, so you can store as much as you like, a few £1,000 a year compared to maybe 20,000 Rand a year. I'd love to know that question, the answer to that question myself.
Could you recycle the coin and make it into a new Krugerrand for the present time, so there'll be no capital gain?
No,
and recycle it. I'm kidding.
No, I think from what my understanding of this question, because I remember when I worked at the Scoin, is that it comes back to what Jonathan had in his presentation, where who has their initial invoice stating when they bought the Krugerrand and at what price to show the values of this Krugerrand. I'm trying to think, it's like I know you can possibly I'm not too clued up on it, but it's like I would equate it to your depreciation of assets in, say, if you bought a motor vehicle for your like a company, and you can reduce your values on that item by that. Would it be able to be done the same way?
Maybe the cost of housing your Ferrari in a controlled environment. I would assume so, as long as you've got the details. It's a good question. Good question. I don't know, but something to think about, and I'll look into it. I will look into it.
Great question.
Okay. If there's anyone has any questions, if they could email Danny, or of course you have Rael and Jonathan's email addresses, you can send them the questions that might come up if you really want to know. Your certificates will be forwarded to you in due course. I really want to thank everybody for attending, and in particular Rael and Jonathan, and of course Anthony, for hosting and being, presenting actually what it is. I reckon there's a lot of food for thought. Nothing seems conclusive. So make hay while the sun shines, maybe. Until such time as things tighten up. And thank you again, and wish everybody a good weekend. And thank you very much.
Thanks to everybody for attending. All the best.
Just more handiwork, housework. Yeah, our next seminar is, Dan, let's just, what is it again?
Sorry, I haven't got it in front of me. Yes, NOCLAR next month.
And so we'll send out the notices soon. Let me just check if anyone else, because give it you got another 5 minutes if you want to ask any questions. Let's get to wait a few seconds just to make sure people are typing out. If you want to put up your hand in the chat box with facility, I can allow you to talk if it's easier for you to ask your question verbally. Let's just wait a few seconds to see. But in the meantime, let's just talk. So the next month we're doing NOCLAR by Edwin Zelps. And if there's any other topics you are interested in, let us know. And we'll carry on and see you out throughout the year.
Yes, so we do have, we still have some seminars to broadcast. We're waiting to confirm them, and we'll let you know in due course. But you will be receiving regular updates from us. Rael, are you going to send us the silver?
Oh yeah, that's maybe what I wanted to ask about Rail. No, it's and bring it up in terms of the quality. I remember a couple of years ago they introduced the silver Krugerrands. So have they been reintroducing those in every year, or was that just the once-off year introduction?
So at first it was believed to be just a celebratory silver for the 50th anniversary, but it was quite popular, and it's continued in the form of those large bullion monster boxes, like a sleeve like that, or proof Krugerrands 1 ounce and 2 ounce in that silver, and it has become popular and people like it. It's a cheaper entry point into collecting coins, but again, silver used to be I don't know, $100 an ounce, and now it's you guys remember the GameStop burst, that bubble in America when they were fighting against the shorters of the margin call guys? Silver went flying up. Silver's been high now, 600-700 rand an ounce. Now it's back to 400-500, but it's like a great entry point into collecting or buying or storing some value for you or your family. People love it. Also, I'm inviting anyone to our offices to see coins and touch them and feel them. It's a very different story to actually see something so small but be so valuable. We can chat, we can do seminars. I'd love to learn more if there's some good ideas that are out there to buy more or sell more coins. Then yeah, I'm all for it.
What is the value of the silver Krugerrand?
It really depends. It's probably 1,000 rand a coin today, depending on which one. Like a bullion type of coin, like could be 600-700 rand an ounce. A proof one could be 1,000 to 1,200 rand for a proof version. Comes with a certificate, a story, and you get different types of people. No, I don't want art. I just want a picture on my wall. Or I don't want this fancy car. I want a car that just gets me from A to B. It just depends on your level. And there's some beautiful, passionate hobbyists who love coins, and there's other people who just love the idea of storing gold and holding their money in physical form.
Right.
So, Danny, are we?
I think, yeah, I haven't seen any more questions. I've just seen everyone saying thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed it. That's always one of my passionate topics, because I worked with Rail for many years. It was one of my first entries into the career path, and it was one of my passions from when I was a kid. So that was an enjoyable topic for me. I hope everyone enjoyed as well. If there's any questions, you can feel free to email us, and I will pass it on to Jonathan and Rail, and we can.
You just got to be careful where you hide them, because I know of a case where a particular person had a lot of worth millions of these, left them in the ceiling, and one of the staff stole it, disappeared into Zimbabwe, and never to be seen again. So watch out.
Yeah, that also reminds me, I remember when I worked with Rail, we often used to get people coming for insurance claims, asking for the values, because they had their Krugers on display, and they had quite a few sets, and the maids were quickly swapping the 1/10 Krugers out and putting little 10-cent pieces in there. So people were checking the system. They saw there were coins in the box. They didn't take notice, and they put it away, only to then further close inspection look and say, okay, this is actually not a Krugerrand in here. you know, how much have they been stolen from? And
Yes.
so, you know, it wasn't like, yeah, they were passing up the big money just to get by for longer. That's interesting to know.
Always check your ceilings and floorboards.
Oh. All right, so I think that's enough.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
very much. Thanks. Have
All
a
the
great
best. God
All the
bless
afternoon.
everyone.
best.
You still got
You're
time
welcome.
to go back to work, all of you. So back to the grindstone. You thought you'd get away with the 4 o'clock one, but Jonathan, you managed to cut it short and give us all the information. So well done to you.
Well done.
Thank
Unless
you.
you want to
Thanks, Dan.
quickly,
Thanks, Dan.
Jonathan, while we got time, do you want to quickly go back to that where you had that DRC and explain it a bit better? I think seeing as we got time, let's actually go back to that. I know you had it. I think we skipped it because we were worried about time at that point. But
Yeah, let me just get there. Give me a second.
Because
I'll bring up the one that that SARS put out, and if you want to go through that, give me a second.
Excuse me, guys, would it be okay for me to just pop off now?
Yeah, I think thanks, Rael. I'm going to
Thank you.
ask Jonathan. As you said, you know about the DRC, but I want to maybe just expand a bit because it's just news to me.
Just go and sell some more Krugerrands.
We'll try. Proof Krugerrands, but thank you.
Yeah.
All the best, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Yes. All the best.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Rael. Thank you for your input. Okay, this is actually the SARS presentation of the DRC. Trying to give me a second, so I'm just going on my screen. So you know, there's quite a lot of additional stuff thing, but what they present that is that the whole purpose of the DRC is really just an anti-avoidance measure to counter this criminal attack, and it's really been something that they had to change the whole system, as Rael mentioned, that they had to even the accounting systems of the guys that are dealing with gold had to change quite significantly. What is one thing is very important, I think. Yes, we said that it shifts the responsibility on the recipient to account for and pay the VAT on the supplier's behalf. So, but what is important is that the supplier and recipient must be registered vendors, and that's where things change. Is that if you're not a registered vendor, so if you're not buying from a registered vendor, then you can't. Then you wouldn't be allowed to do that normally, but you can't then claim based on some strange creation of an invoice that you've made. So therefore, what they call this missing trader fraud scheme, this kind of deals with that in a very profound and an appropriate way. Just want to get to I'll show you where it, yeah. So what does the domestic reverse charge really mean? It means that the VAT charged at the normal rate on the taxable of supply goods must be accounted for and is payable on the supplier's behalf by the recipient. So the recipient of the good then pays the VAT. Normally the supplier would pay the VAT back. He would pay the VAT, and in doing that, it makes it much more difficult for him to get around anything. I mean, certainly he can't make any money off that's like VAT arbitrage type of idea that he was doing. Specifically, it speaks about valuable metals. Now, what are valuable metals? And you'll see here where it speaks of any goods containing gold, form of jewelry, bars, bank coins, ingots, buttons, wire, plates, etc., etc., etc. So it's anything, but it doesn't include goods produced from raw material by any holder. And he explains that what that means. A holder is a person who's carrying on mining operations. So if you look here, and I think this is probably the most important slide of the lot, the current system. Here's your vendor. Your vendor sells at 115, which is where you have a value of 100 and your VAT is at 15%, right? Under that thing, then the vendor B will sell that on, right? at 230, let's call it, for the sake of that. He then, where there's now VAT at 30. So if you look at those VATs, the vendor A currently, he's going to pay that VAT directly to SARS. The vendor B, he's paid out his 15 because he paid vendor A. Now he has to pay 15 to SARS. Vendor C increases his price. He gets 45 Rand of VAT. He's going to pay 15 to VAT, and in total, SARS is going to get its 15% VAT. That's not a problem. That's how the current economy, but that's assuming that everybody's paying the VAT as they need to pay. So therefore, what we've changed it now is that the same numbers, the same from vendor A to vendor B, but at that point, the VAT has to be paid by vendor B. As you can see there, that 15 goes up into SARS. Then the next sale, the same thing happens up to vendor C is the one who has to make the payment of the VAT. And so therefore, and then the on sale there to your end consumer, obviously your end consumer doesn't have to, but that's how it would work. And I think that's really the most important thing, is that the reverse is that it's no longer up to the seller to make the payment of the VAT, but really it's up to, meaning the supplier, but rather up to the purchaser. So what does it do? It ensures that the recipient is a registered vendor. And the normal VAT invoice has to be put through, but there's a feature which it says it's subject to the DRC valuable metal provisions. And so therefore the VAT must be accounted for and paid by the recipient rather than by the supplier. Obviously pays on behalf of the supplier. And I think this is where Rail was saying, is that now your supplier, in order for him to be able to claim back the VAT that he's paid, he has to wait for the recipient to actually make that payment before he can. And so therefore there's quite a lag, could be potentially a lag, especially for the little guy who really needs it quite dramatically. The supplier will do again normal VAT rules with an additional feature where he speaks about that the supply was subject to the DRC valuable metal rules, and the appropriate entries need to be made by the supplier, and it's all about this valuable metal rule. I think the most important part of it is is two facts. Firstly, it's normal VAT rules. Whether it's just being moved on from one party to another as to exactly who's paying it. But the additional keeping is that one has to maintain a list of suppliers of the valuable metal, and there has to always be proof that the recipient is a registered vendor, and the recipient has to furnish proof that the supplied the registered vendor. And there's no VAT being paid, it's rather being paid directly to SARS, and so therefore this will counteract the impact of the VAT claim on a zero-rated sale, let's say overseas somewhere, because absolutely clear in the books of the exporter, who is effectively the recipient, as to what VAT has been paid and what VAT has not been paid. I think that's pretty comprehensive. Except here we go here. What happens if you don't do that? What happens if you don't go according to the rules set out by SARS? So then it's a joint and several liability for any loss that comes. Obviously, the supplier can say, well, the recipient was supposed to do it. I did everything. I gave him all the necessary documentation. If he's able to do that, then SARS will obviously have a certain level of compassion on the supplier. And the failure to do this actually is a criminal offence. It's a criminal offence. It's in breach of South African tax law, and therefore one wouldn't do that. And in doing that, they've really clamped down on all of these concerns that they had, and hopefully it takes away that risk, because as was clear from what we did discuss, there was an enormous amount of tax fraud, of VAT fraud happening, where people were claiming VAT which they never actually paid out initially. So, Danny, I hope that gives a good indication of this of the domestic reverse charge, and anybody who'd like this specific presentation, I'm happy to.
I was going to say it was originally in the original notes. It was on the slide titled.
Yes, it's on the slide. This is on the slide.
But it's back. But to make it easier for
slides,
everyone,
Danny, which you can just send through.
So yeah, I will download it just to make it easier, and I will send that through when I send the recordings to everyone. I will include this as a separate item, just to make it easier for you that you can get it, because sometimes people have problems getting the links out of the original presentation. But thank you again, Jonathan. It was interesting to learn. And yes, if there's any final questions, we're going to close off soon. I think it was a nice, entertaining, and informative afternoon. So I thank you again. Thank you, Anthony, for always helping out. And yeah, we'll see everyone again later again in this month.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thanks so very much. Thanks, everybody. All the best.
So be well.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, guys.